what's up guys? John here from the REI Contractor show, and today I'm from T&L Wiring Pros. So most of you know me, but if you don't know me, I'm actually a master electrician. That's how I got my start into contracting. So I got my electrical license at 22, got my master's license at 25. At that point, it was a record in Ontario for the youngest. And I started my first electrical contracting business when I was 25. I probably should have waited until I had a little more business knowledge and money behind me, but hey, we learned the lessons. And so today we're talking about electrical wiring, and especially where it comes to real estate investing and what this show's all about. There is lots of touching points. There's a lot of detailed subject. A lot of it you're not going to understand, but I'm going to try to give you some points and tidbits to identify and realize what's involved with each kind of section. This is the true subject that I'm a true expert at, so I'm hoping I can give you some real details in this one. Basically, when you're identifying a property, you're looking at a property to buy, or you've bought a property, or you have one that's already got this, there's 5 or 6 different types of wiring we've used over the years, and each one has their own special way to deal with them, problems, good things, bad things, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to run through them all pretty quickly. I got some pictures that I'm going to be looking at. We'll have them up on the screen for you, and hopefully you'll be able to identify them this way. So the first one we're going to talk about is everybody's favorite, knob and tube. Now, knob and tube, I love knob and tube, to be honest with you, but that's because I've been working with it for a long time. It's one of the specialties that I have and my companies have. So in this photo, it's clearly identified, you'll see here, but you'll see that anything that goes through the wood, you'll see these porcelain tubes, and that's clearly identified in the picture here. And what those did is it kept the wire off of in between the combustible wood. Because this wire wasn't protected by a jacket. This one just had individual strands, so we only used 2 wires. We used the hot wire, the neutral wire, and they were always run separately. So you'll know today that everything's built into one cable. This had advantages and disadvantages, but knob and tube itself, when it's untouched, is completely fine. The problem is, over the years, we've added and spliced and touched it, and that's where it goes wrong. All the connections were done inside of walls instead of electrical boxes like we use today. So when we made splices, we would solder them together and put basically hockey tape material around it, right? Which was fine at the time. Soldering was great, but 100 years later, this stuff is starting to separate, break, the insulation's cracking, that's where it becomes dangerous. One thing you need about electrical, is that the biggest enemy of it is heat and arcing. Arcing is when a wire is the energy is trying to jump the gap between 2 points. So this is where the live and this is where the wire goes. If it's just a small gap, it'll try to jump. Now that's an arc. Arc is the same heat as the sun. So you can imagine how dangerous that is when you're in 100-year-old wood. And that's basically what's wrong with knob and tube. It's a fire hazard, and it's not grounded, so it doesn't protect any shock hazards. Protect any from shock or anything like that. So what the problem is it's when it's been touched, okay? And over the years it was touched. So most insurance companies nowadays won't insure it. There is a couple that will do if you do come into it. Most of them will give you time to deal with it. But knob and tube is not a cheap job to replace. Let's pretend you're dealing with a 2-story, 1,500 square foot home. You can expect anywhere between $9,000 and $20,000, and you got to remember there's going to be patches and painting to do afterwards. Now, this is where you want to make sure that you're working with an electrical contractor that is good with knob and tube, because it'll really limit the amount of damage that happens to your home. For us, we make 2 or 3 finger size holes where we need to, and it's easy to patch. Well, I've seen electricians come in with hammers and staples, and it's a real mess. So searching for an electrical contractor, make sure they have experience with knob and tube. So basically what you're doing when you're doing this is you're not taking all this wire out, you're basically killing it and leaving it in the wall. And then what's happened is just dead, it's just garbage. And then we're fishing new wires into all the locations. One thing you need to know about knob and tube wires is when you do them, they have to be brought up to today's code, right? So it's not like there's a plug here and a plug here, that's fine. No, we have to add them to code. All of this should be inspected by the Electrical Safety Authority when it's done, and then given a certificate to the insurance, and then you're off the hook and you have brand new wiring. One thing that you need to be really aware of is that most people don't know what they're talking about when it comes to knob and tube. So here's an example. If you get a home inspection done, the home inspector says, I think there's 10% knob and tube. Excuse the language, that's impossible. It can't be done. It doesn't work. Knob and tube was all spliced in the walls, and there's impossible to think that. So it's either one circuit or the whole house, okay, and it's nothing in between. So it's key that if you think you might have knob and tube, get an electrical contractor to come in and do a full assessment, because most home inspectors don't have a clue. Another thing you have to be really careful about is because of the price of knob and tube and people get scared of it, they try to jimmy rig or hide knob and tube. And that happens more often than not. It's probably 80% of the houses I find are actually hidden knob and tube, so they've hide it. So I've seen people hide junction boxes right on the ceiling joist where the wires came down to conceal it and have new wires go into it. I've actually seen people push knob and tube into new wiring boxes, do connections in the wall and just push it down. I've seen some terrible, terrible things. I've made more old ladies cry about what my assessment of knob and tube than I could care to remember. I'm not bragging about that. It's truly sad when people hide it. But I mean, we've seen it all for what people do with knob and tube, and they'll attach, you know, brand new wire inside the wall to make it look like that, and all of a sudden you go to do something or you go to sell the house and you realize you have knob and tube, you've been scammed. It happens a lot, so be really careful. Don't trust your home inspector on this one. I mean, home inspectors can give you a good framework, but if you have it, get it checked out by an electrical contractor. It's not going to cost you a lot of money. Some guy's going to charge you 3-4 hours, and maybe you spend $300, but you'll find out whether you have to do $20,000 worth of wiring work or not. Personally, I wouldn't be afraid of it if you have things, especially if you can boost the lift of the value of the home by doing it yourself, because you got to be careful. Some people are going to try to knock off a lot of money to do it, so something to think about. But always trust the electrical contractor that you trust. Don't leave it to anybody else. So all of a sudden I became a blabbermouth, and I could talk about electrical for days. This is what my thing. It's truly a passion of mine. So we're going to not do this in one big series of wiring. We're gonna do a series of videos, not one big video. So the next one's gonna be about ungrounded wiring, the one that came right after knob and tube. I appreciate you watching. Please like and subscribe.